Jasmine Crockett sat across from The View host's Tuesday morning, poised in a tailored suit, her calm demeanor steady but alert. The cameras rolled. The audience applauded, and Jasmine offered a gracious nod. There was optimism in the studio, a conversation about bipartisan solutions, not chaos. Whoopi Goldberg smiled and said, "Welcome back to The View, Congresswoman Crockett. We're here to discuss your bill on criminal justice reform and attorney general policy. You have a lot of support, especially from moderate voters. Tell us where you stand." Jasmine said, "Thank you, Whoopi. My goal is to reduce recidivism with smart reforms, investing in mental health, job training, and community outreach while ensuring public safety remains paramount." Joy Behar leaned in and said, "That sounds good. But critics on the right say you're soft on crime. They say reform isn't tough enough. How do you respond to that?" Jasmine said, "I understand their concern. But tough on crime can't mean soft on prevention. My bill holds people accountable, but it also gives them a path back. It's both firm and compassionate." Sunny Hostin nodded and said, "You also said earlier that you wanted to keep the conversation bipartisan. That's rare these days. Are you seeing progress?" Jasmine said, "Yes. I've had unexpected endorsements from both parties. That tells me people want results over rhetoric." Whoopi said, "And yet, crime spikes in some cities worry people. How do you balance that?" Jasmine said, "By letting data guide us. We invest where needed, respond where crimes happen, and treat root causes when possible." Sarah Haynes added, "You've been effective in Congress. Is this becoming a career definer for you?" Jasmine said, "It could be. But my focus is on healing communities, whatever it takes." Joy Behar shifted. She said, "Congresswoman, I just want to ask, some communities feel like their pain is ignored while reformers get applause. Does that bother you?" Jasmine paused, then said, "It does. No community should feel silenced in this debate. My approach tries to bring voices forward." Joy nodded, then said, "I appreciate that. But I've heard from families who lost loved ones to violent crime. They say reform sounds good until you meet their grief. What do you say to them?" Jasmine's tone softened. She said, "I say that I see your grief, I feel it, and the system failed you. My work is trying to make sure it doesn't fail again." Joy said, "And yet, some see reform as sacrificing justice on the altar of compassion." Jasmine said, "Reform doesn't sacrifice justice. It redefines it, to include prevention and healing." Joy's eyes narrowed. She said, "Prevention, healing, sound like a script. But the real world doesn't follow scripts. Lives are being destroyed." Jasmine replied, "And that's why we improve from within the system." Joy shook her head. She said sharply, "You think just adding budgets and job programs solves bullets in the streets?" The room went quiet. Jasmine held her gaze. She said, "I think making opportunities available to kids keeps bullets from coming near them." Joy snorted quietly. She said, "Sounds like suburban fairy tales to me." A collective gasp echoed in the audience. The air shifted. Sunny spoke up, voice low. She said, "Joy?" Jasmine said quietly, "Congresswoman Crockett." But Joy continued. She said, "Courageous fairy tales, Congresswoman. It's easy to talk reform when you don't walk those streets." Jasmine's posture stiffened. She looked directly at Joy and said, "I walked those streets. And I now walk these halls trying to change them." Joy said, "Yes, but a fairy tale is still a fairy tale. And people need reality." Jasmine said, "And reality needs progress." The studio was tense, louder than polite TV, quieter than shouting. The audience felt it. Whoopi said gently, "Let's take a moment." The pause loomed. Jasmine sat back, but didn't speak. Joy folded her arms, expression defiant. Jasmine looked at the hosts. She said softly, "If I can't be heard, I have to leave." The lights dimmed for break. But Jasmine stood. She said, "I came here to have this conversation. This isn't it." She turned and walked away. The cameras cut to the hosts. Whoopi stunned, Sunny looking conflicted, Sarah red-faced. The audience gasped again as they realized the moment just happened, right before their eyes. The producers tried to restore calm during the break, but the damage was done. Jasmine Crockett had walked off the set, live and unscripted. The audience buzzed with whispers, unsure if the show would even return. When the cameras rolled again, Whoopi Goldberg's tone was serious. She said, "We just want to acknowledge that Congresswoman Crockett chose to step away. Sometimes, conversations get too heated. That's not what we intend here, and we thank her for coming." Joy Behar sat rigid, arms folded. She said nothing. Sunny Hostin leaned in. She said, "What happened was painful. We have to be better listeners, especially when we invite someone into our space." Joy finally spoke. She said, "I don't apologize for challenging anyone on policy. I don't care if it's a congresswoman or the president. People deserve straight questions." Sarah Haynes said gently, "But sometimes it's not about the question. It's how the question lands." That moment, when you said what you said, it didn't sound like policy. It sounded personal. Joy said sharply, "Because this is personal, Sarah. Crime is personal. Death is personal." Sunny said, "So is dignity." Off camera, Jasmine's team issued a short statement. It read, "Congresswoman Crockett went on The View to discuss real solutions. What she got was a stage that treated her like a caricature. She walked out because no woman of color should have to sit through that kind of dismissal, not in 2025. The clip spread online within minutes. Viewers saw the tension. They heard Joy's tone. They watched Jasmine rise. And they chose sides. Some praised Joy for keeping it real. Others saw it differently. Another example of how women of color are told their experiences are fairy tales if they don't match someone else's version of reality. Jasmine went live that afternoon on Instagram. Her voice was measured but steady. She said, "I walked into that studio hoping for a good faith conversation. What I got was something different. It wasn't a disagreement about crime. It was a dismissal of lived experience. And I couldn't sit through that." She paused, then added, "I don't walk out of rooms lightly. But sometimes, leaving a room is the most powerful thing you can do." The comments flooded in. Support, outrage, even some apologies from people who had once questioned her. That night, Joy addressed it again on the show's after segment. She looked into the camera and said, "Maybe I should have said it differently. But I didn't call her a liar. I just don't believe that policy alone stops pain." Whoopi said quietly, "Then maybe we should start asking better questions." The next morning, Jasmine was back on the house floor. Calm, collected, focused. A reporter asked if she'd ever return to The View. Jasmine smiled slightly and said, "Only if the conversation has grown." The clip of her walkout would be played on news shows, discussed on podcasts, debated across dinner tables. But for many watching, especially women who knew what it felt like to be interrupted, dismissed, or told their truths were too idealistic, it wasn't just a walkout. It was a statement. Because sometimes, power isn't in raising your voice. Sometimes, it's in knowing exactly when to walk away. And knowing that when you do, millions are walking with you. This is Hype Talk Studio. Subscribe if you've ever left a room not because you gave up, but because you knew your voice deserved better. Subscribe if you believe dignity isn't given, it's defended. Subscribe if you know that silence isn't weakness. It's a choice. And sometimes, it's the loudest one.